welcome everyone to my first podcast, Stellar Dialogue, a podcast where we're going to be discussing space in general, postulations about alien life, postulations about technology for traveling and living in space, just general thoughts and postulations about spacefaring. The primary goal of the podcast will be to have a public dialogue about humanity going to space, and not just small projects, but actually planetary exploration, colonizing moons, colonizing our moon, things like that, And well, like I said, this is my first one. I'm pretty much hoping that it's gonna be all right. Just a little background about me, myself. You can call me PW. Arkane Infinity works for this. I already have pretty much a thing going with the video game things, but like I would guess with most people, I have more than one interest in life. And since a very young child, I've always been interested in space travel, technology, and things like that, the future. Growing up in the 80s, I could very much see around me that our planet, our species, was in dire need for some advanced technology. And it was like, put it like this, it's the one thing that facilitated me to be interested in video games and technology and science and particle physics and things like that. All my life having ideas about inventions and space travel and how alien species could be in planet formation, how stars are formed and all that stuff. From the background where I come from, it was nothing. It was basically would be a luxury to think of these things, but it was something I always had a mind for. And I would say now that I have a platform in which I can talk about my own ideas and postulations about those subjects, I figured I might as well go ahead and at least put my ideas out there. So here we are. I decided to call it Stellar Dialogue because that's basically what it is. It's a dialogue about the stellar phenomena. Well, let's dive right on in. Okay. One of the first things that I would say, something that I would like to ask most people, a lot of human beings, basically. I asked this question all while growing up: is why do you think there are aliens? Like I've been skeptical of another life form coming to our planet for a very long time, only because of the simple fact of by the time I was 12 years old, I had an understanding of science to know that it was very difficult to go into space. Extremely difficult. And I would say that's a very big ask for what I could label an individual species to evolve on a planet and then develop enough to leave that planet and not die. I think that's a very big ask. The only analogy that I could think of that's similar to that's like an ant colony deciding and knowing that, yeah, we're on this planet and we're gonna go from where we are right now to the other side of the planet. That's tough for an ant species on a planet which would provide them with gravity, water, and resources to indeed do that, to traverse a planet from one side to the other. But we all know their scale would make that task almost impossible. They would have to invent technologies well beyond their scale, beyond their size. At their size, could they smelt metals? Could they do electrical engineering to create vehicles at that scale of living? At their size, Even if an ant was intelligent to understand the idea of creating transportation that was motorized without using its own energy, a way in which in lifting and moving larger objects than it can currently lift on its own physically, even if an ant could understand that ability, their scale prevents them from doing much about it. How could an ant handle fire enough to smelt metal? Now, I'm pretty sure there are ingenious ways at their scale that the electromagnetic field works in ways that could very much help them. They could, I mean, at their scale, an ant could pretty much fabricate some flying device with leaves and some forms of light fabric, and they could form, probably build a plane of some sort, but then they have to contest with weather conditions and water and such. And see, that's where I would say, well, they need electrical engineering so they can understand the weather and what the weather's going to be at least 2-3 acres from where they are, let alone 2-3 miles, which is an immense distance at that scale. Either way, to transverse our planet from one side to the other at the scale of an ant, it is almost impossible. They would need hyperintelligence just to do it. Now, I'm not saying that it is impossible to travel in and through space. We prove that ourselves. We know scientifically it is very feasible and something possible to do. But I would say one of the first subjects in this first podcast I would like to cover is that we generally have a fantasy of an alien species being so intelligent and so smart that they've created some technology that allows them to travel vast distances in space, and they're doing it for an altruistic meaning or something, and it generally is a juvenile idea. I do apologize if it does offend anybody to say that, but I do believe Stephen Hawking himself even said that if aliens show up on our doorstep, it's not a good thing. And that's something I see species as we should see species, like you see different insect species. You wouldn't expect a beetle to be compliant and friendly and acquiesce to an ant or a grasshopper or a praying mantis or any other insect in the realm of insects. They are separate species, and they either see each other as food or foe. And I know you would say, well, an intelligent species on the planet would obviously know another intelligent species coming from their planet. They would not necessarily engage in violence. See, I believe the reason Stephen Hawking believes that we are in trouble if an alien species shows up, because the immense difficulty that it takes to travel from one solar system to another, let alone a vast distance in space, is a great deal of power. And if you come across a species that is sub-evolved compared to your species, the idea that you would not take advantage of that species does seem juvenile, because we do that amongst our own in our species. And you say, well, they're an advanced species, they wouldn't do anything like that. No. Being an advanced species does not inherently mean that you are peaceful to other species. Now, I would say to be a spacefaring species, you may indeed need to have no conflict within your own species on your own planet, because it takes an immense amount of resources to sustain a spacefaring endeavor of any kind, which is why it is so difficult for us to have our spacefaring endeavors go beyond sending robots and probes and 1 or 2 manned missions to the moon and just orbital flights. It is very difficult. It is not an easy ask to get a species that is evolved and developed on a gravitational field They need that to live, as well as the certain magnetic field of the planet that they are on. It's something no one really understands, but every planet has its own field. They're not going to be all the same field. If you're on a planet very similar to ours, but it has let's say the core of the planet, just like Earth, but it has 20% more nickel in its core and 20% less iron. Well, it's going to rotate at a different speed. It's going to have a different gravitational field. The gravity is going to be different. It may not be vastly different, but it will be different because of the configuration of its core. And that's something that almost dictates the type of life that will evolve on the planet. That and the environment on the surface. The elements and the biome that is on the surface, which is also connected to its distance from the sun and the way in which its gravitational fields of the similar bodies in its orbit or not in its orbit affected. We can already see through the evidence of time that Mars was okay for a while, but it did not have a stabilizing moon. So it flipped on its axis every couple 100,000 years, which would destroy the atmosphere. It would, if that were to happen to Earth, we would be destroyed. We can't have our planet flipping on its own axis because it's not stabilized. We are stabilized because we have a tidally locked moon facing us. So we see the same side of the moon all the time. There is day and night on the moon all the time. The sun rises and falls on the moon all the time. It has an Earth's rise and an Earth fall as well. But that stabilizing moon, it also stabilizes our atmosphere and our environment, which made it possible for our species to, in fact, evolve. The difficulty it is to be a spacefaring species. Because another thing that goes in line with being spacefaring as well, you're going to need a stable planet with a stable solar system. You can't have a solar system where it's pull shots every few thousand years. And planets are getting destroyed and new debris is being thrown into the celestial area where you would possibly be sending your probes and all of your test vehicles. Because if you're going to be spacefaring, you're going to be taking basically the same road we're taking, where you will start with a whole bunch of small probes, a whole bunch of small person flights, basically, and as you get better and develop more technology, you'd go further and do better. But I would say two of the chief reasons that we do not have spacefaring species all throughout the sky. And I do know the statistics of we haven't sent many signals more than 70 light years from ourselves. There's like a 70 light year bubble around us, where signals that we have sent, that's the furthest they've gone. So you can't say that, oh, there are no aliens, because you just got just a small sample size, and we haven't really sampled enough to say, well, there are no spacefaring species. Well, I'm using deductive reasoning and in our species as kind of the canary in the mine, kind of, using our species as the one to kind of understand why we don't see as many. I would think, at least from all the deep surveys and all the different views we've had of the night sky, that we would have seen streaks across the sky. We would have seen fleets or we would have seen anything. There would have been something we would have visually seen if there were a large amount of spacefaring species, if it was a normal thing. But it is an actually extremely rare thing for there to be a spacefaring species, for there to be a life that develops on a planet or moon, and in turn create some form of technology so they can leave that planet or moon or go to another one, and not in just a one-off event, but like a number of ships, an actual community, space stations and all that. That right there, I say, is something of fantasy, because you're asking a lot for there to be a community of species that know each other and work together in a stellar fashion. It's mainly, I would say it's mainly planetary. You would find people working together because they are the same species, so it seems easier to work together. Now, not that to have this first podcast be a complete downer for those of you like me who like the idea of space travel, who may be fans of things like Star Trek or Star Wars or Stargate or anything that has to do with space travel. Don't fret. I'm not saying it is something that will never happen and cannot happen. It is simple. It is simply that we have to understand there are certain things that need to be accomplished for it to be something for an entire species to say, hey, I'm going to go to the moon. I'm going to go to this. I'm going to go to that. Let me ferry a transport off planet. This is indeed possible. It truly is. But before we get into the possibilities of it, let's dive back. And what I want to talk about now, it's this idea I've had for a while, and it's okay. Let's take a quick thought experiment, okay? And in this thought experiment, we live infinite. We have no life and death, but in this thought experiment, we are experiencing time. So as in this thought experiment, you are a species on some planet. Okay, and as you evolve on this planet, well, one of the first things you're going to do as a species, and this is something I would say 99% of species that evolve on some celestial body, not a moon, but an actual planet that has formed and has endured long enough that it created enough different variations of the DNA inherent to the planet to create some form of life that can walk, talk, communicate, think, and have thoughts. Okay, so you have this species that has basically, they've been given, I don't know where to say given, they have basically inherited this free lunch, as it will, and before they can form language, before they can form communities or technologies, before they can smelt metals or even learn the ability of what they can do with wood, one of the first things that they're going to do is they're going to look up into the sky. And depending on where they are, they will have thoughts about the things they see in the sky. This is something that is ubiquitous amongst living species, I would say in our galaxy at the least, let alone throughout the known universe. The odd thing is, there's no rule book. There's no one showing up when a species is developing, when they're creating language, when they're creating lore, when they're creating maths, when they're creating medicines, when they're creating things for themselves. No one shows up to say, hey, that stuff you see in the sky, that's not people or conscious things. That's rocks and fire and water and ice. It's just debris floating around in this thing with no gravity. No one explains what's going on to a species as they develop. So it is inherent on each species to develop and basically develop itself to understand what medium they are actually in. See, I would say 60 to 70% of species throughout our galaxy, at least our galaxy. Let's take a small sample. Let's not include every galaxy in the universe. Let's start with just ours. That's a pretty big sample of planets and solar systems. So if we say just our galaxy, I'd say 60 to 70% of the life that develop on planets, let alone moons, probably end up locked into something that is akin to believing in gods based on what they see in their sky. I would also postulate that, and put forth the idea that our sky here on Earth is probably pretty boring compared to other stars and what they would see when they look up. I would generally think that most species have a band of stars in their sky similar to ours, which we call the Milky Way, because just about everything in our galaxy is on that plane, and so most solar systems, except for any wayward ones, would be on that plane. And so when they look up in their sky, they would more than likely see the same band of stars depending on their pitch, angle, and rotation of their planet. And it's weird when you think about it, but it kind of makes sense. Most species would end up locked into some form of, kind of like we did in our early ages. I mean, that's the reason we have the word constellation. It's why we have a lot of our things, is because our species, before we had anything other than fire, before fire, believe it or not, I'm telling you, they looked up in the sky and ask yourself, as a person that has to hunt animals for clothing and food and use sticks for fire and bow and arrows and things, when your child asks you in their native tongue, what is that in the sky? What would you tell them? At this point in our evolution as a species, humans, you can tell a human child, the different things we've discovered from looking up and sending probes and doing experiments. This is a star, this is a rocket, you can tell them that from that development. But from before then, it would be all just superstition. And like I said, I think that holds back 60 to 70% of species in our galaxy. Now, the ones that do get past that and probably say, hey, those are actual things, that light in the sky, maybe they have different versions of it, but they would probably come to the same conclusions scientifically, had they formed their science on something based in reality that they can then postulate on, kind of like we do with our particle physics and then general relativity. Because there also is the chance that you can have a society and a community and you can have science, and the science itself can be based off beliefs and not actually based off facts. And having a society that uses a belief-based science would indeed cause it to fail at some point in the future. It would not lead to a spacefaring species. We see from the evidence on our planet already that we actually will at some point cause our own extinction through violence or the pollution of our climate, to the where it will be impossible for the spacefaring species, but our climate will be so destructive that the majority of the human species will be suffering under our climate crisis. And anyone going to space, it's more than likely just to escape, but the escape would not last long, because if we evolved on Earth and we want to travel the stars, we need to find a way to replicate it perfectly. Not near perfectly, but perfectly. We have to be able to simulate the gravity, the electromagnetic field that surrounds our planet, and that field would be a certain frequency and polarity, intensity and frequency. And, and that's good for our genome as a human. Once we can simulate that, then yeah, and then proper oxygen. But as of now, we don't have the technology. The problem with that, our technology for space travel is bespoke. And if you're going to space, if you're going to be a space-faring species, if you're going to travel from one planet to another and take your spaceship and land it and take it up and, possibly go through an ion storm, maybe hit by a piece of debris, you're going to need replacement parts. You're going to need a fleet. You're going to need something on hand to keep you from blowing up at every little mistake. Now, it would be almost impossible to set up stations. So we're going to travel 6 light years to this star that we haven't charted yet, or we haven't been there yet. There are no filling stations on the way. There are no gas stations or stop places to get extra resources. So all those resources need to come with you, which in turn makes the ship heavier and the voyage even that tougher and more difficult. Well, that. Oddly enough, humans actually have a couple inventions for that. We have a thing called mass production and an invention called the assembly line. Now, I wasn't sure if I wanted to get into the actual abilities and requirements for spacefaring, but we have time. It's a podcast. You just talk and have fun, and so let's get into that. The abilities and the requirements. I mean, pretty much, the human species, we are kind of on the road to being spacefaring, but there are a number of things directly in our way that will impede this. Now, I don't want to get into any geopolitical things, but yeah, a species that is at war with itself will never be spacefaring. That's just a fact, because there's no way one nation state's going to be okay with another nation state landing aliens on the planet without their approval. A war would ensue almost instantly if one nation state was to discover an alien species and then they are actually in talks with the alien species. The first idea to the head is, oh, they're going to help them or give them weapons to destroy us. So that's instant war. Instant. So, and you can understand from the other side, if you are indeed a spacefaring species and you come upon a planet that is not united and has several nation states, then you cannot communicate with them, because you would cause a war just by communicating, let alone, talking to any of them. And then talk about the idea of just landing your ship and say, oh, okay, well, we'll land and we'll try to talk to both sides or all sides, and we won't show you. Well, there's no guarantee that any of those nation states won't decide to just shoot weapons at that landing spot, because they feel like, well, they're never going to be our friends and we can't let them be friends with them either, so we're going to have to blow them up. These are things that just a normal human of our own species is thinking of. So I would imagine an alien species who's quote unquote advanced would, think that. And my idea is that probably is not the case. I would say, if I were to just guess, let's use that word guess, or postulate. If I were to postulate, I would say that humanity is of the 0.004. Humanity is of the 0.004 percentage of species that actually have the ability to be spacefaring. But it is a very tough ask to ask that of a species. I would say of all the species in the galaxy, in our galaxy. At least 40% have not made it past the Egyptian technological age. I would say there are maybe 10 to 20% that are stuck in the Bronze Age. And it may not be anything of their own doing. You could evolve on a planet that does not actually have the elements that it takes to be spacefaring. And that I would say that's probably one of the biggest hurdles. The biggest hurdles you can face as a species is that you evolve on a planet that just does not have the elements nor the raw material for you to leave that planet in which you are stuck there. I mean, could you imagine evolving on a planet that does not have copper or doesn't have iron ore? Maybe it's a planet that's all nickel or aluminum. I mean, like, and iron is a rare element that would seriously impede the technological advancement of your species. You know, and I would also say that this green lush planet that we have would probably be somewhere around 20% of planets that are habitable in our galaxy. If we look at the statistics of the solar systems that we've seen now and of our own, it would seem planets that are rocky with liquid water are not in the high 50% and higher range. It's a lower number. So that would also in turn mean that of the species that develop on these planets, that it's a roll of the dice whether they will implode or not even develop. I mean, could you imagine a species that was very similar to ours, but they got to a point where they used fuel and gas and everything like we did? And yeah, and it was at that point that there was lead in their gas and no one really noticed it. Maybe their science wasn't good enough. Maybe it was covered up enough and the people running it didn't care. I mean, but it is actually possible that a number of things that we ourselves as a species have dodged, that a number of other species did not. I would also postulate that at some point in the future, if we do become spacefaring, we would actually in turn find that there are planets where a species completely killed itself with nuclear war, or a species completely killed itself with its own fuel. I mean, it is actually not uncommon when you think about it. Most species, like I said in the beginning, most species are going to look up in the sky and see those stars and they're going to be blown away and they're not going to really know the facts of what's really going on. And they'll go down the road of burning fossil fuels. It could be anything. It could be some animal on their planet that's still running around that produces a lot of fat. And they don't have to kill it too much. They just take off the fat, drain the fat or something, and they burn the oil of this animal. And maybe just the burning of the oil is bad for their environment. But they love the animal, and it's the animal's everything about their culture. And they never really think that it's something bad for them, and it destroys them. It doesn't always have to be evil and corruption that destroys a species from within. A species can kill itself without even knowing that it's doing it. It's kind of similar to, like, I don't know if you've ever seen or known of this phenomenon where a fungus can grow, and if it's inside a concealed environment, it'll grow and consume all the things around it that it can. But it's producing waste and eating up its own oxygen. And at some point, it will consume everything and produce so much waste within its own area that it's stuck in. It can't go anymore. It's just a fungus. It can't migrate from where it is. Once it consumes all of that and eats up all its own oxygen, because most fungi, as long as there's fresh oxygen, they'll at least stay in some state until they can consume again. But without fresh oxygen and it consumes everything around it, it will in turn just wither and die. And I'd say that happens to a lot of species in our galaxy. Not by a fault of their own, they just consume all that they can consume. And from the waste of what they consume, they destroy themselves. you know. Now, of the species that get technologically advanced and then in turn find a way to destroy themselves, that's not actually a high number. But believe it or not, if you develop advanced technology, it is not easy to kill yourself with the advanced technology, but the actual beings themselves using the technology. Usually once advanced technology starts taking hold in a society and they see the advantages of it, it normally it spreads and the society takes off. Well, actually, see, no, I'm wrong. Normally, once some advanced technology is introduced to a technology, is a mad dash for people to be at the top in most societies. In most species, actually, it's sad to say it's ubiquitous. It's an individual entity thing. We like to think that and we think this about alien species, which is funny because we are an alien species ourselves. We are of the group that is a species that evolved on a planet and developed a society and a community and a civilization. We are that. And we must include ourselves in that as well when we start making our calculations. Then you see, you have to understand every living individual entity, no matter what species it is, human or some other alien species, no matter what it is, it has its own wants and needs. It will want to accomplish and, not fail or be happy, have food. I mean, if indeed you are a individual, no matter what planet you are on, and there's math, society, community, arts, communication, language, well, that means there's going to be a social structure there. Whether it's, like, to use our species as an example, whether it's some form of a royal society or democratic society, authoritarian, no matter what type of society is, all of the individuals in that society have their own wants and desires. And that, my friends, that is the funny thing, because that itself can actually destroy a species' ability to be spacefaring. It can be just social reasons. It's very similar to our planet. They could have all the technology that they need to exactly do that. Be spacefaring. Be basically Star Trek. But if the people themselves are not at that level, it doesn't matter if the technology is in hand or not. And that's probably the main point of this first podcast, is we can't assume that an alien species has achieved some form of social peace and altruism when it doesn't really exist in thought. When you do a real thought experiment, you can't see it really happening, because there's always going to be someone wanting something that someone else has that they do not have. One of the reasons I come to the conclusion that we're not going to be spacefaring so easily, I don't know how to word this. It's a weird thought. Okay, I think I got it. Okay, here it is. It's a bit controversial. Let me tell you that right now. It's a bit controversial in intellectual pursuits. It's definitely controversial. But there's no way you're going to be going to space, being a spacefaring species, and it's all kumbaya on your planet. Now, understand, I don't mean like your planet must be at war with each other. No. The nation states should be united, but you're united under the goal that you are going to space for a purpose. Here's the thing. If you have a peaceful planet, there's no war. Everyone's been so peaceful that you've gotten rid of all of your weapons of war, military weapons, anything that can, guns and all that. Then why are you going to space? I will tell you now, without even leading you on about it, if you're going to space and you're all kumbaya super peaceful, you're gonna die. There's no way. If you land on some alien species planet at any level of their development less than your peacefulness development, they are going to take everything from you, find out where your planet is, and then go take everything from there using your technology. That is a fact. You can do the thought experiment yourself with the human experience. Had aliens being super peaceful, no weapons at all, come land on Earth anytime in the 1890s, 19 teens, 1920s, 1700s, the 1500s, 2010, 2020, 1984, you name the date. If any peaceful aliens with no weapons, no way to defend themselves, land on our planet saying, hey, we're here to be your friends, how long do you think they live? No, seriously, be honest. Think of humanity. Think of our planet. Think of our history. Think of at what point in history, at any point, would an alien species would have been safe to land on our planet, waving their hands with no weapons, like, we're pure peaceful to be your friends. Now, sure enough, there may be, I would say there's a good 2 to 3 million, maybe 2 to 3 billion people on the planet that will be like, oh, that's wonderful. They're our friends. They're going to shake their hands, invite them for dinner, get to know them, learn about their ship, all that good stuff, apple pie and all that good stuff. But there are a number of my fellow human beings that's going to be like, wait a minute, you come from another planet? You have a spaceship? Wait, you don't have a gun to defend yourself? Yeah, they're going to take your spaceship. And you would say, well, the nice humans would protect the aliens. And there I go back around to the subject again. It's instant war on our planet, on the planet they land on. So, I mean, if you're a totally altruistic, peaceful species, you're not going to space, because you would see is, why are we leaving our home planet? Everything's here. It's all love and peaceful here. Why do you want to go into the stars? Right. So, yeah, we should have peace on Earth with humans, yes. And I'm not saying that we all of a sudden should start looking to go conquer other alien species or planets. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we need to be a bit curt about the idea of space travel and spacefaring. You know, for one, it's an advancement of our entire planet to be doing this. The asteroid field and the Oort cloud are both filled with resources, and we can mine them with human-controlled drones from Earth and other space stations, and people who are good at piloting drones and computerized stuff. Ooh, what do you know? They can pilot these drones, gather resources. The resources are ferried back to the moon, where they're refined, and we use them to create more ships within the assembly line, making mass production with high quality production as well. Yes, I think I might have covered a little too many subjects in our first podcast here. I mean, I think I've hit pretty much all my bullet points that I have over here of what I wanted to talk about. It's not a bright light for aliens, for like us, for species living on planets. It's not a bright light. Most futures on planets, most species who evolve on a planet die on the planet. 99.9999999% of alien lives that develop on a planet or moon die there. They evolve and they go extinct on the same planet. That is the norm. That basically is the norm of the universe. It is not normal for for a species develop on a planet and to travel to another one. Yes, in about 25% of species in our galaxy, I'd say at the least, develop some form of flight and launch probes and different things into space. They even send personed vehicles up. But to develop actual spacefaring life, spacefaring, that's tough. And just to give you an idea of what that means, if you are a country with one car, you are not road faring. If you're a country with 2 cars, 3, 10 cars, you're not road faring. It's not until you have a community of cars on the road, there are gas stations, there are roads, there are laws, there are traffic enforcements, then you're a road faring country. Same goes with seafaring. You're not seafaring if you have one boat as a country. No. Now, as a person, if you're a single individual and you have a boat, you're seafaring. You have a car, you're road faring because you yourself are. But as your country, your town, the community, for it to be a community, that means the community has that ability. So our planet does not have the ability to go into space. We have individuals and organizations that are spacefaring. But the human species, sadly to say, at this moment, we are not spacefaring. We are nowhere near spacefaring. I would like us to be there. And it would take a lot of work. It would take a lot of work. We really won't get into all the things of what it would take for our particular species to be spacefaring. That's a very long conversation. We do not have the time for that, nor do we have the capacity and our patience for that. But other species, let's talk about them. We still have some time. Let's jump back to our postulation of alien life. Now, the thing that I always come back to is and I know that I have a bit of a person that has my back, I guess you could say, in the realm of Neil deGrasse Tyson himself have spoken much to the same thing, that as much as we look at all this stuff in our science fiction of all these weird configurations of aliens, well, if you're an alien evolving on a planet and liquid methane is on your surface, like you have seas of liquid methane and there's methane gas and all throughout the air. Okay, well, I'll give you kudos for being a species that evolved in such an environment. But as soon as your people discover fire, that's the end of you. It's not like, oh, we just discovered fire. Yeah, there's an ocean of methane right there. As soon as you light that next spark, the whole planet's going to go up in flames. So they're not developing technology on that planet. That's the thing. If you are a living species on that planet, then you are pretty much tough luck. If there's oceans of methane on your planet, that's flammable. And you say, oh, well, it's pressurized, that's why it's left. Yeah, but it's methane. It's not, no matter what your genome is, it's a chemical that is flammable. And it's everywhere. That would mean if it's oceans of methane, that means methane is in you. You probably breathe it, and it's part of your circulatory system. So that means that species also lives under that intense pressure. So they would have to have pressurized suits just to get in. But see, here's the whole thing. How did they even get them smelting metal, right? That you're not developing it because you have methane all over the place. It's like if you are on a planet with liquid hydrogen in pools everywhere. Well, that's a highly pressurized planet to have liquid hydrogen or liquid nitrogen or something like that. So you would expect an alien species that's going to at least be walking around on their surface with bows and arrows, campfires. They're going to have a similar atmosphere to ours. Now, with the nitrogen oxygen atmosphere, you can have different variations and mixing on that depending on the genome of the planet. That's the wonderful thing. We discover a planet where they are living species very similar to us, and maybe their planet's a lot larger than ours, but on their planet it's not as much, oxygen. Maybe the oxygen is a little lower. Maybe it's a 50% oxygen and 50% nitrogen. So when we go there, it's a little tough for us to breathe, because it's a very low oxygen. And I would say, since it's a larger planet, we ourselves on that planet would be smaller than them, and gravity would affect us lower. You would think, oh, it's a bigger planet. It's by being a bigger planet, that means a lot of the fauna and everything may be a bit bigger on it, with the atmosphere being a lot thinner but heavier gravity. When it comes to the configuration of planets and the way in which the life develops on the planet, it gets pretty interesting once you start fooling around with the parameters of the environment, because an environment with very little water on its surface and most of its water is subsurface, then you would think that the species themselves would have low levels of water within their own body themselves. They wouldn't be configured of 50% water. They may have at least 40% water in their body, and unless actually, because it would match the planet. If you evolve on a planet, your genome is compatible with the planet that you evolve on. That's just the way it works. If you evolve there, if that's the place where you developed your whole entire existence, then you are part of the environment. Part of the environment is in you, just like parts of the stars and all that. I mean, we all come from the same thing, and in turn, an alien species would come from its, it would make sense that they would come from their whole star. Their genome and everything would come from that. Very similar to ours. I would say most of the atoms in our genome more than likely come from our whole star. Other stars that use it to create our star, yeah, but we also are part of our host star. It would follow. Like most life that develops in a certain environment, they are actually part of that environment that they evolved in. So that would hold true for species on planets. It would be interesting, though. And it's something that I know a lot of people in the scientific world, and a lot of us who are scientific fans and nerds in us, we can't wait to find our first Earth-like planet and to be able to send a probe to it, and just to see what the plants look like, at the least. The color of the sky. What's the chemical composition of the water? I mean, there are lots of scientific people who would be ears up, as it were, to say, we found an extraterrestrial Earth similar to ours, but it seems to be half the size. Ooh. I mean, see, for someone like me that has been following a lot of what science has been discovering over the past hundreds years, to hear that we discovered a planet, an extraterrestrial planet, similar to Earth, but it's half the size of Earth. First question I have is, do they have a moon? What's the size of their moon? Is it tidally locked? How much water is on the surface of that planet? What is its core made of? And then the next question is, what's its gravity like? Because we all can't wait to travel there. And I would say, I think that's the one special thing about humans. Now, I don't want to say I don't think we're going to be spacefaring. I think we are. I just think it's going to take so much from us to do it. And we may end up losing a lot of us before we do it. I kind of don't want that to happen, I wish there was some uniting force that made humans come together and say, hey, we got to get up on there and protect. I mean, as it stands, we can't protect ourselves as a species. We cannot protect ourselves. If an alien species came here and wanted to attack us and say, if you're traveling interstellarly in space, more than likely your ships are not that strong. Let's be honest, quite scientifically, your ship is probably not going to be that strong if it's made to go great distances. You'll probably have fighters or something with you for defending the ship, maybe some massive weapons, but for fuel economy and efficiency, you wouldn't want the ship to be too heavy unless you come up with, well, I was going to say, unless you come up with some way to change the weight of metal, but we've already discovered the Higgs field, and I will be discussing the Higgs field and all and what that means in our next podcast of Stellar Dialogue. But for now, we're not going to touch too much on the Higgs field. But say you do have a ship and it's massively heavy. Well, okay, it's tough. We can't shoot you from the surface and blow it up in the sky, but it's not that fast. Not that maneuverable, being that heavy. Even in space, it's going to take a lot to move a heavy ship. It's going to need to be light and have lots of space and energy and all this. I mean, to be going from space to space like that, I mean, it's from what I would understand and how I would build a spaceship, it wouldn't be that tough, So no alien species would come here looking to get into a ground battle with us, nor would an alien species come here looking to get into an air fight with us. If an alien species come here and their intent is to do us harm, and maybe they want to destroy us completely, they would just throw a rock, one of our rocks in our own, asteroid belt. That would take nothing to destroy this planet from space, from orbit, from solar orbit. It would take nothing. We do not have any defenses in our solar system for our planet. We have nothing. Lasers and nukes won't do the job because, first of all, it would take too long to roll it out to defend us. Say someone's on the horizon and they're going to be here in 12 hours. Well, we're pretty much screwed. They can be on the way. They can push. They can just get right behind a rock, calculate the trajectory, and push it. And then we see it and panic for 24 hours or whatever until it hits here because there's nothing we can do to stop it. Nukes or not, because they could keep doing it. Saying they throw one, we launch emergency launch rockets and this, that, SpaceX kick in, the Russians, China, everyone pitch in, we launch up a rocket, nukes, we blow it out of the sky, and then we look up and they're shooting another one, and another one, and another one. We are not ready to fight an alien species. They do not have to land on our planet. They don't even have to come into our solar system. That's how bad it is. That's also one of the reasons why Stephen Hawking, and I keep forgetting all the other people that agree with him, but that is why we do not want an alien species showing up until we are ready for them. Because it is not going to be a good day. It will not be a good day for us. It's going to be the worst day in history, to tell you the truth. The first couple of hours, scientists and people around the world be celebrating, hey, they're alien, but we are gone. And I know a number of people are saying to themselves, wait a minute, what about the UAPs? Come on, what about the UAPs? Aren't those aliens? The government said they don't know what it is. Nobody's taking credit for it. And I would say, yeah, because it's Earth-based. It's Earth-based. Just the actions of it alone tell me it's Earth-based. Okay. Alien species come to Earth, and instead of going around population centers and gauging whether the population centers are going to be defended or not, it's going around the military things. What, to see if they'll shoot at it? Why would they do that? That makes no sense. I'll give you two thoughts of this. If the aliens are here mere peaceful just to learn, then you don't go around our military. That's the first thing you don't do. You don't have to be an advanced species to know that's going to that would cause them to try to kill you. You're secretly flying around our military? That's not the thing you do as a peaceful alien species. if you're trying to spy on us. And I guess they think that we don't see them. I guess that would be one of the thoughts, It's, oh, they're flying around our military installations and our ships, but they don't think we can see them. They're spying on us. That still doesn't hold water. It doesn't. If you're traveling from one solar system to the next, the level of technology you have is far beyond our radar and LiDAR. So I wouldn't even understand why it would be interesting in the least. It would make very little sense for them to do that. The first things that you would do if you're here and aggressive and you're trying to actually attack the human species, then they're not even attacking. The UAPs aren't doing anything. They're just floating. You know what it actually looks like? It looks like someone found a new way of flying or some new technology, and they're testing to see what happens on their own military. Because if someone say, hey, this buggy, we're going to take a shot, he can beep, hey, it's one of us, don't blow it up. It's that easy. It's that easy because you have their frequency. You know who you're flying around. So, yeah, in conclusion about the UAPs, I also have a video up about it already on my postulation and ideas about the UAPs. And yeah, I believe the UAPs are 100% man-made because we did, in fact, crack the Higgs field.
A new boson with a mass of 125.3 plus or minus 0.6 GeV at 4.9 standard deviation.
We observe an excess of 5.0 sigma in this region.
Before UAPs showed up. And I know you're saying, well, yeah, the Higgs field, but that deals with particles, not actual big, large objects. And I would say to you, yeah, we've been 3D printing metal for at least 10 years now. Metallurgy, we've been working with metal for hundreds of years. We have metals that bounce, metals that bend. We have metals that change shape on heat. I can't even name the different types of metals we have. I mean, it's insane. There are so many metals that there's an entire whole order of it called metallurgy. So I mean, like, yeah, I personally believe that when they cracked the Higgs field and they showed the formula of how to actually achieve the Higgs field, all it did was tell somebody what parameters to dial in for metal to make it not affected by the Higgs field. And it's not a pretty hard conclusion to come to. I mean, when they cracked the Higgs field, I know a lot of stuff was going on in the world and not many people paid attention to the fact that they discovered the Higgs field. At least they actually, they were actually getting contact with the Higgs field. I was all over it, and I couldn't believe in the months ensuing, like, wow, they put the actual formula in a documentary. And all I could think is that this is the Peter Higgs theorized that there's a field that gives weight to particles. Yeah. Well, it's not like, okay, particles and we're going to end there. It only affects particles and that's it. That's like saying the nuclear forces only affect particles. The strong and weak force, well, but the strong and weak force is what we need for our bigger things to work. That I don't understand why some scientists try to discount the link between quantum physics and the theory of relativity. I know people saying like, oh, they're trying to come up with a unified theory. What are you talking about? No. They seem to be trying to divide it because it makes no sense. If they discovered the Higgs field, it's a quantum thing. Yeah, well, all of relativity, all of everything, all of our whole lives, we are walking and living on the quantum field. We don't exist without the quantum field. What are you talking about? Without the whole quantum field, there is no small particles. There's no us because we are made of all of that stuff. So when I hear them just discount completely, oh yeah, the Higgs field, that has nothing to do with actual big things. You either you don't know what you're talking about, or you're deliberately lying to people because you don't want people to know that yeah, you discovered the thing to make things float. We can have the jets and stuff, the hoverboard. We can have that. All we have to do is make all the components not affected by the Higgs field. But see, that would be too much of a discovery for our species, because that would mean so much. Just that one discovery would mean so much. Moving things would be easy because you clamp a couple Higgs field adjusters on the side of something. Oop, it doesn't weigh nothing. You can carry it across the room, turn them off, and now it's back to its normal weight. It is a very simple idea. And is more complex. Has not that very same little change in a quantum field is what we use for so much stuff already. So to say we found the quantum field that changes the weight of things, particles particularly, the things that make up the big things, but it doesn't affect the big things. That's lying straight to your face. Lying straight. They're like saying we found this thing that affects the electromagnetic field to make the lights go on and off. But it don't work for big stuff. So how do lights work then? Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but to me it seems like they just don't want to let the cat out of the bag that our species literally discovered the thing to make things float. We can have flying cars. We can have all that stuff. I think the main reason is because most humans are stupid, and it's going to lead to us killing ourselves a lot faster because people are already crashing into houses. If the cars are flying, they're going to be crashing into people's houses in the sky. So, I mean, yeah, that's my whole little spiel right there, you know. I don't know how this will be received, you know, but let's just say I had a hankering to talk about a lot of things, and there are no podcasts out there that talk about the things that are interesting to me. I like science and space, and I watched Star Talk and other documentaries on science, and it's good for the information, but they never get down to anything real fun. You know, is it just me? Or when they start talking about something that can be fun, then they have to jump over to another subject, and you never really get to hear, like, scientists really just go off into their imaginations off the science that they know. It seems as though they're a little restrained and don't want to, well, we don't want to give people ideas. What's wrong with giving people ideas? You know, I mean, it does seem like our species is never going to go to space in our lifetime. So you can at least have a good discussion about it, since we're not going to actually get there. I don't see it happening in 50 years, 60 years, and 100 years. In 100 years, I don't see humans building a colony on the moon and you being able to go visit someone on the moon and go to a theme park and restaurant on the moon. I don't see that happening in the least 100 years. No, at the best, maybe 5,000 years from now. And it'll be just because we need to save ourselves or clear up some room from the population density of our planet. I mean, the main reason we should be wanting to go to space is because it would free up room on Earth while we have people colonizing our solar system at the very least, let alone other solar systems. And I would say we should get on it before it is a necessity, so that we actually have the ability and can improve on it easily before it being a necessity, and then we end up losing so many people because, well, things were done wrong because we were rushing. Well, we didn't know we had to take the whole population off the planet. Yeah, well, we should be getting ahead of that. For a fact, we know that our sun will, in fact, go supernova. And you say, yeah, that's not for millions of years. That is not the fact of the case. The fact that is it will do it. And as it stands now, we have no way to evacuate our planet, no place to go. We are SOL if our sun decides to go big red in another 5 years. Say scientists discover 2 years from now that, oh, our calculations are wrong. The sun might go supernova in the next 100 years. Yeah, everyone's going to go crazy. And I'm pretty sure they'll try to keep the public calm and say, don't worry, we'll be able to blah, 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 blah. We should be on it from the jump. Now, I can go into detail more about each of these subjects if you leave in the comments if there's anything more you'd like me to talk about or reiterate, or maybe something that I was talking about and I got sidetracked and didn't talk about. Definitely say, hey, you didn't finish talking about this, because I'm scatterbrained right now. First podcast, I don't know what's going on really. I'm just going off my bullet points, and it's not very detailed. I just wanted to get the stuff out there. I do want to say thank you for listening all the way through to my madness on the Stellar Dialogue podcast here. I am your host, Arkane Infinity, and yeah, this is just the first one. We'll be discussing more stuff about space, alien life, technology for traveling in space, the ideas of spacefaring. Again, the primary goal is to open a dialogue about humanity going to space en masse, spacefaring species, and the abilities and requirements it is to be spacefaring. Just to open a dialogue about it, because, well, I want the moon base where we're refining metals and people work there, and then there's a theme park, and we can see Earth from certain resorts on the moon, and there's a base on Mars where we're trying to change the atmosphere of Mars, and there's a couple military colonies, and then we got this. I want that future, and it doesn't seem as though anyone's trying to get it. So hopefully this podcast can open a dialogue about humanity going to space en masse, because we can't be a one planet species. I want to be a multi-planet species. I want to be a spacefaring species. I want us to conquer space as we've conquered land, conquer other planets as we've conquered our seas. That's all I want for my human brothers and sisters. Terror Prime forever, my friends. You guys be good. Thanks again for watching and listening. And I will catch you guys in the next one. You guys be good. Love for your species and love for space. You guys be good. Take it easy. We're out of here.